Hi, I'm Dr. Fran Macko, and I'm a professional development coordinator with CICEROSystems. I'm going to talk a little bit today about the new Common Core state standards and what they mean for teachers of social studies and history. The Common Core state standards are an effort to move towards a national set of standards that are rigorous and benchmarked and are connected to what students should know and be able to do to be ready for college and or the workforce. A lot of buzz about Common Core, a lot of anxiety about Common Core, and even though the standards are for literacy and math, the question always remains, well, what does that mean for us as teachers of social studies and history? As I say, these standards are researched and evidence-based, and they're aligned with college and work expectations. So what does that mean? Well, basically, the Common Core standards hope to provide a clear and consistent understanding of what students are expected to learn so that teachers and parents can help them reach those particular benchmarks. And the idea of consistency and the idea of clarity, I think, is what really makes the Common Core state standards particularly important, but also raises a lot of questions and a lot of concerns. And I think when we think about how we can best prepare our kids, whether they're elementary school, middle school, or high school, to really be effective either in the workforce or at college, and also prepare them to enter the global world that we face today, we need to think about what will they know and be able to do. So what does this mean for social studies and history teachers? Well, embedded in those literacy standards for grades 6 to 12 are content literacy standards. And what are those standards? Well, they're based on teachers using their content area expertise. So for us as social studies and history teachers, it means using the knowledge we have of history content to help kids meet the challenges of reading, writing, speaking, and listening in a particular content area. So we're thinking here about how do we help our students become better readers of history and better thinkers of history. So they are those historical thinking skills, and they're also the content literacy skills. And the Common Core standards are not a replacement for your particular state standards in social studies and history, but they're really meant to complement it, and they're really meant to help us as teachers think about what can I do as a teacher to help my students be more effective thinkers historically and more effective of reading history. And the focus, and I think this is a critical focus for teachers of social studies and history, is that the focus of the literacy standards helping kids read increasingly sophisticated informational text. And informational text is what we really base so much of our instruction on. Think about it. Documents, primary sources, our textbooks, newspaper articles are all examples of informational text. So the movement in the Common Core to informational text and that close reading of informational text, I think will help propel social studies and history back into a role of prominence that it's often lacked with No Child Left Behind and a focus more on literacy and math. So now your colleagues in the English department are going to have to think more in terms of helping students learn to be effective readers of informational text, which in turn will help us when the students come to us for social studies in terms of having a better level of proficiency in reading informational text. But it also means for us as teachers of social studies and history that much of what we're going to do now with our students in terms of reading and understanding documents and primary and secondary sources has a lot to do with what are those content literacy skills that we need to develop and have students refine and apply when they read text. It sounds a bit daunting, especially since for most of us who are secondary teachers, we say, well, we're not reading teachers. What does that mean for us? Well, it doesn't mean we're teaching reading. It means that we're thinking about what are those reading skills that historians use to approach documents. And I think once we think of it that way, and once we think about what our expectations are for our students, we want them to be able to read a document or read a primary source and be able to understand it and to be able to analyze it and apply that knowledge, whether it's in a debate or to a writing task or in class discussion. So I think this is going to be critical for us also. As many of you know who are in states where the Common Core has been adopted, we're looking at this year, 2013, as the year of implementation, with assessments coming down the road in 2014-15. And what we see as happening in terms of assessment, this would be ELA assessment, is that there will be an increasing opportunity for students to look at informational text, compare fiction and nonfiction, analyze them, and be able to apply it to a writing task. Okay. So let's take a closer look at the particular standards and see how they break down in terms of the skills we want our students to be able to master. Okay. There are three broad categories. If you go online and look for Common Core state standards, you'll see there are benchmark standards for grade 6, grade 8, and grade 12. Okay? And they're divided into three subcategories: key ideas and details, craft and structure, and integration of knowledge and ideas. And these are further subdivided. Now, with any set of standards, this can be a bit daunting. They're rather lengthy. Sometimes the language is difficult to unpack. So what we've done at CICEROSystems is we've come up with a learning framework. We have taken those skills and put them together in a one-page document that I think breaks them down in a way that you will find very useful. And we've added a fourth component to the three. So let me go through these briefly and kind of talk a little bit about them and give you something to think about in terms of what you might see as a teacher, where your strengths are, where your needs might be. We've added contextualization, and I think contextualization is critical in having kids analyze informational text. They need to understand the context in which the document or the primary source was written. So it means establishing the time, the scope, and the sequence. When was it written? How does that particular piece of informational text fit into a larger picture? And what is the scope? How significant was it to that particular time? What impact does it have on subsequent events? Also, it means establishing the values and the beliefs of the time. Often students have a lot of difficulty when reading a primary source because they say, well, I don't understand how people could think that way. Well, the critical to understanding a document is understanding exactly what the worldview was. How did people feel in those days? What did they think? And how does that influence how they approached a particular issue? And that all comes down to understanding the big picture. And that's critical in historical thinking. Where does this document fit in? Not looking at it in isolation, but thinking about it in terms of the larger picture of history. Okay. Going to craft and structure, which is the first in the Common Core, that goes to really beginning to think about what it means to closely read a document. It means identifying and defining key terms. And we know for students that a big stumbling block in history is academic vocabulary and concept. Having kids understand critical terms and concepts. It also means determining the main idea. Having students be able to think about what is the main idea of this document? What is the argument that the author is setting forth? And it's also identifying the author's point of view. And you can see how all of these really are connected, because point of view goes back to contextualization. It goes back to establishing the values and the beliefs of the time. That will impact a person's point of view, how each of us feels, what our beliefs are, how we see the world, what our assumptions are, always influences point of view. Key ideas and details. assessing the reliability of the information. How reliable is this source? And again, what we know about the author, what we know about the author's purpose, affects how reliable the source is. It also means evaluating the argument and the reasoning. Again, here we get to that close reading of documents. What we do as teachers in history all the time. Let's look at this argument. Is it a valid argument? Is it well reasoned? Are the points that the author make, do they hold up based on what we know of the time? And it also is comparing ideas across and within texts. And this is going to be key with Common Core, helping kids look at a piece of informational text and a piece of fiction and saying, what are the ideas? What are the ideas that are reflected in both? How do these ideas compare? And also thinking about how do ideas compare and how do they change over time? And finally, the fourth category we have in our framework is integration of knowledge and ideas. And this is all about perspective. And I think perspective is critical for kids to understand in life and in history. It's helping them analyze multiple sources and perspective. Understanding there's more than one way to look at a particular event or issue or individual in history. Okay. Understanding the perspectives, which means, again, going back to that close reading, which goes back to evaluating the argument, assessing the reliability, establishing the value. So again, you can see how interconnected the four components of the framework are. And assessing different interpretations over time, the historiography. How have different individuals, historians, interpreted an event over time? Certainly we see something like the Civil War and how the interpretations of the Civil War have changed over, say, in the past 100 years. Okay? So that's the Common Core, kind of just a little introduction to it and to our Common Core learning framework, and the idea that this, I think, is a crucial opportunity and a wonderful opportunity for teachers of social studies and history to have the recognition of the importance of informational text, and also an opportunity for us to think about how we can support our students in becoming better thinkers historically, and more importantly, better readers of history. And by applying some different strategies that we can do easily in our classroom that do not involve us being teachers of reading, we can help our kids read, comprehend, and analyze increasingly different informational text. If you'd like more information on how we can support you in your professional development needs, check out our website at www.CICEROSystems.com.